Hey, it's Sam, and today I'll be showing you how to make the perfect peanut butter cheesecake. Today's recipe took a lot of testing, but it yields a beautiful, creamy cheesecake with a distinct, deep peanut butter flavor. I think you're going to love this one, and it's actually very easy to make, so let's jump right into it. Now, the first thing you want to do is get your oven preheating to 325 degrees Fahrenheit. You also want to make sure you have a rack arranged to the center of your oven because that's the one we'll be using today. So for today's recipe, you could use my classic graham cracker crust if you want, but I think peanut butter and Oreo just go so well together, so I'm going to be doing an Oreo cookie crust. You're going to need 35 Oreo cookies for this. There's one step you have to do before you can start pulverizing them, and that is we need to remove the cream. I know it's kind of annoying and it's an extra step, but what happens when you bake a cheesecake with the Oreo cream in the crust is it starts to seep out the side of even the most airtight, well-fitted springform pans. So we're going to just remove that risk and scrape out the majority of the cream, and we'll drop our cookies into our food processor. The cream comes off best if you twist the cookie. Usually it does. Usually it'll stick to one side, and then you can scrape it out. And you can see I have a little bit of residual cream in there. That's fine. You don't have to get every single speck. Something I've been wanting to try is making this crust with my homemade Oreo cookie shells. If any of you try that, let me know how it turns out. It's on my to-do list. There we go. Now they're separating nicely. So the cream, you're just going to discard that. There's not really much you can do with it. Not many good uses for the Oreo cream without the cookie. So I've dropped these into my food processor, and now I'm going to blend them up, pulse them in the processor with the blade attachment until we have fine crumbs. This will only take a couple seconds. We're going to check this out, make sure we don't have any large cookie pieces remaining. And we don't. So we can add our butter. You will need 5 tablespoons of melted butter. I'm using unsalted butter today. We'll just drizzle this right in, and we don't waste butter around here. So we are gonna get every bit of that. And we'll just pulse this a couple more times until all of the cookie crumbs are moistened by the butter. Just a couple of blitzes there. Take a look again. Beautiful. All right, we'll pop this off. Now here's where your springform pan comes in. You will need a 9-inch springform pan for this recipe. We'll just go ahead and add our cookie crumbs right in there. Let me get rid of this blade. And you'll want to press these cookie crumbs firmly into the bottom and up the sides of your springform pan. And I have talked about this so many times before, but one of the best things you can do when you're making a cheesecake without a water bath, which is how I do it, I never use a water bath, is make sure you press your crust high enough up the side so that when you add your cheesecake filling, the crust is still higher than the cheesecake filling. At the risk of sounding like a broken record, I will say again that this is helpful because one of the biggest causes of cracks in cheesecakes is while the cheesecake is cooling, sometimes it sticks to the sides of the pan, and that tension of the cheesecake trying to cool but being stuck, that causes cracks. Now, if the crust is higher than the filling, what happens is that crust will shrink ever so slightly with that cheesecake, then there's no tension and you have no cracks. That being said, if you end up with cracks anyway, just remember we're going to be covering this with a chocolate ganache, so it's not really that big of a deal. All right, crust is prepped. We are going to set this aside. There's no need to pre-bake it or anything like that. It'll firm up while it sits, and then it will be completely in the oven. Now let's make our cheesecake filling. You'll need a large mixing bowl. And to this, we are going to add 24 ounces of softened cream cheese. Anytime you're making cheesecake, you want to look for the brick-style cream cheese, not the spreadable kind sold in tubs. That won't work. And also do not use a low-fat cream cheese. I have had very bad experiences with that as well. This cream cheese has softened. It's been sitting out for over an hour now, and it's softened to room temperature. And that's really important because if the cream cheese is too cold, you can end up with lumps in your cheesecake, and they can be really hard or even impossible to get rid of, so just set yourself up for success. Set your cream cheese out ahead of time. We are also going to be using 1 cup of creamy peanut butter. I have not tested this recipe with natural peanut butter. You're probably familiar with the kind that separates, so I cannot say for sure how it would work with that. I would be hesitant to try it just because of the nature of that peanut butter. Sometimes it doesn't work as well. We're also going to add 1 1/4 cups of granulated sugar. And while today's recipe could absolutely be made in your stand mixer, today I am just going to be using my electric hand mixer instead. We'll cream these ingredients together until they are smooth and lump-free. So at this point of mixing, one thing I do look out for is I do not want to overmix this mixture. I don't want to beat too much air into it because that can also sort of degrade the final texture of the cheesecake, and it can also lend itself to creating cracks in the finished product. So I've mixed it on a lower speed. I'm going to scrape the sides and bottom, make sure everything is nicely incorporated. And then this actually looks pretty good, so I actually don't need to stir it anymore. So our next ingredient is a must when you are making a cheesecake, 1/2 cup of sour cream. Sour cream just gives it such a great depth of flavor. Cheesecake, if you've ever had a cheesecake and the taste just completely fell flat, it's probably because it was made without sour cream. We'll also add 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract, and we'll stir everything together again. And once again, we'll try to not whip too much air into the mixture. Nice and easy. It is good practice to regularly scrape the sides and bottom of your bowl with your spatula just to make sure there are no lumps hiding. And this is also true, actually it's especially true if you are using a stand mixer. Beautiful. Okay, so let's talk about our eggs. You will need 3 large eggs for today's recipe, and these should ideally be at room temperature. Go ahead and crack these. And let me know if you are tired of hearing me go over this in every cheesecake video, but this is just such an important thing I have to mention it here. The eggs are also key to making sure your cheesecake has a nice, smooth, creamy texture and is crack-free. Overbeating the eggs in your cheesecake is a surefire way to end up with cracks or a cheesecake that rises too much and then sinks after it's baked or browns on top. So to combat this, we want to minimize the amount of air we're mixing in. So I like to lightly scramble my eggs with a whisk or a fork before I add them into the batter. Now, once it's time to add them into the batter, I do so 1 at a time. And again, we just stir nice and slow just until that egg is mostly incorporated before we add the next one. This mixer doesn't like to go slow. This is a workhorse mixer. Egg number 2. See if I can do it with one hand. Oh, could have been cleaner, but look at that. Getting fancy for you guys today. Egg number 2. And egg number 3. Get that 3rd egg mixed in. Once that you have your 3rd egg mostly combined, we're going to add our final ingredient for the filling, which is 2 tablespoons of heavy cream. So while I was doing my testing, I found that peanut butter is, probably not surprisingly, really dense and really heavy, and it was just making the texture of my cheesecake a little bit too dense for my liking. A little bit of heavy cream lightened things up, gave me that creamy texture I was looking for, but again, it's really important that you don't overmix it because you know what happens if you whip cream too much. It's going to turn into airy whipped cream. You don't want that in our cheesecake, so go low and slow. All right, I have that just barely combined. So we will do a final scrape of all of the ingredients. Make sure you scrape the bottom really well here. You want your batter to be nice and uniform. Hopefully it's nice and lump-free. Because of the peanut butter, it can sometimes have like dense streaks of peanut butter in it, so just watch out for those. All right, beautiful. Grab your springform pan, and we'll pour this batter right into the pan. Every last drop of it that we can reasonably scrape. Okay, I think that's reasonable. And smooth the surface of your cheesecake so you have a nice even layer. And now we will take this over to our 325-degree Fahrenheit oven where we will bake it in the center rack without a water bath, and it's going to need to bake for about 50 minutes. When the cheesecake is finished baking, the sides should be set, but if you jiggle the cheesecake, it should still be jiggly in the center, a bit like Jell-O. Now at this point, you can either turn off the oven, crack the door, and let it cool in the oven for about an hour before you take it out to room temperature, or you can just place it on top of your oven and let it cool there. Now, if any of your cheesecake has baked to the side of the pan, as soon as it comes out of the oven, you'll want to take a sharp knife and use that to gently loosen the cheesecake from the pan. Now this cheesecake is of course going to need to cool. I will usually let it cool to about room temperature, then it goes into the fridge where it needs to chill for at least 6 hours, preferably overnight. Now I do have a cheesecake that I prepared last night just for the occasion. So this is the one we're going to slice into and serve in just a minute, but I do like to top this with ganache. We're going to whip up some ganache real quickly to pour over it. You'll need a half cup of heavy cream and 3 ounces of either a finely chopped chocolate bar, or I'm using couverture chocolate instead. And I'm just going to do this really quickly in the microwave. So I'll just pop this in the microwave for 25 seconds. And then we'll use a whisk to whisk until it's smooth. And if your chocolate isn't melted enough, just pop it back in the microwave in like 10 or 15-second intervals. I do like to let this cool for about 5 or 10 minutes before I pour it over my cheesecake, just because it can be pretty thin while it's still warm. Once that cream's a little bit thicker, we can go ahead and pour it over our cheesecake. I said cream, but I meant ganache. Now I don't always use all of it. And I like to just pop this in the fridge and let it solidify before I add the final touch, which is just a half batch of my homemade whipped cream. All right, this ganache definitely could be more set than it is, but those of you who've been following me for a while know patience is not exactly my thing. So we're going to go ahead and decorate this and slice in. I made a half batch of my homemade whipped cream, and we're just going to do some little swirls on top. This is the, I think it's the 848 tip. Again, this is totally optional, but look how pretty that is. And then sometimes if I'm feeling really extra, I will crush up some Reese's Pieces, maybe chop up some of those mini peanut butter cups, and I'll sprinkle those on top, which is what I did for the photos on my blog post. Okay, the odds of some chocolate smearing happening are high, but we're gonna go for it anyway. And for storing purposes, I always leave the springform ring on until I'm ready to serve the cheesecake. And then with any leftovers, I'll pop that ring back on, pop it in the fridge. It's just easier to store that way. I always get nervous with the first cut. And this is gonna be a little messy, but it's gonna be so good. Honestly, I thought that was gonna be, oops. Honestly, I thought that was gonna be messier than it was. There you have it. Look at that creamy cheesecake filling, the perfect ganache that's not as messy as I thought it would be, and the whipped cream is a bonus, but I do recommend it. I hope you enjoyed today's recipe. If you try this one, please leave a comment. Let me know what you think. I always love hearing from you. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Look at that. So creamy. Seriously, you have to try this. The flavor is good.